Hello everyone and welcome back to Dicebreaker. It is I, Michael Whelan, your head of video, and I'm going to be joined by the entirety of the Dicebreaker team, including Matt Jarvis, Alex Meehan, and Olivia Kennedy, as we talk about our games of the year for 2021. We've all picked one game that is our personal favourite. We've also got a podcast coming up towards Christmas time where we'll be talking about some of the other games that didn't quite get to that number one spot. But rest assured that every single game on this list, all four of them are fantastic picks. So if you are looking for something to play from this year, this is a pretty strong collection. So without further ado, here is Olivia Kennedy with the first game of the year from Dicebreaker Stuff.
This year, or half a year, has been a bit of a whirlwind for me. Having joined the Dicebreaker team in May, I did most of my discovery of a range of games during the last 6 months or so. I can certainly say that my game of the year was a fairly easy pick though. It captures everything I love about board games, what got me into the hobby, and my favourite aspects of it, as well as paving the way for other games like it. My game of the year is Unfathomable by Fantasy Flight Games, designed by Tony Fanchi and Corey Konechka. I'll start with a bit of background on the game. As some of you may know, Unfathomable is basically a remaster of Battlestar Galactica, the board game, released in 2008. Only this time you're facing the Deep Ones instead of the Cylons. And obviously it's a big boat and not a giant spaceship. With Konechka having designed the original Battlestar Galactica game and worked on other Arkham Files games such as Eldritch Horror, you could be sure that this was going to be faithful to both sources. If you've played Eldritch Horror before, you might have played against Cthulhu and the Deep Ones, making every sea space virtually uninhabitable due to the risk of bumping into the fishfolk and getting into an altercation with them. I see Unfathomable as a zoom-in on these instances, taking on the sea beasts while using your skills and just straight-up magic to defeat them and allow you to get to shore alive. The gameplay takes place on a huge and beautifully designed board, which includes interactive dials to track your resources and places for all the game elements conveniently signposted, and areas of the board helpfully labelled. The object of the game is to play as one of the various crew members and passengers on board, who are diverse and offer an array of fun role-playing opportunities, each with their own special abilities that are essential to keeping the ship afloat. Along with that, two players are afforded the role of captain and keeper of the tome, respectively, depending on your character's position on a hierarchical list. These roles keep things interesting in that they are given important tasks and decisions to make. Beware though, if your crewmates don't think you're doing a ship-shape job, they can throw you in the brig. Isn't that a bit extreme, you might be thinking? Well, viewer, it's completely justified when there might be a traitor in your midst. With this hidden role mechanic, play is going to be unpredictable every game. You might think hidden roles in board games are overdone, and to some extent I do agree with you there, but here are some things that make Unfathomable different in that regard. Number one, there is always a traitor. In some hidden role games, it may appear as though there's a traitor when, in fact, everyone is innocent. For example, Dead of Winter. In this game though, if there isn't a traitor at the start of the game, one will emerge halfway through in the awakening phase. Admittedly, this can throw a spanner into the works for someone who was trying to be a team player up until that point. Number two, everyone is equal. Everyone is given a certain amount of time to look at their role at the beginning of the game, and it is discouraged to outright accuse people and question them of their role. If you think someone is a traitor, in the brig they go. Simple as that. And number three, the traitor can reveal themselves as an action on their turn. They can just commit to being a traitor on their turn and run about causing havoc freely. This takes away the frustration of knowing that you've been found out or having suspicion thrown at you no matter what you do. Just reveal as a traitor and give the other players one more thing to worry about. Along with that, you get to take part in the classic Arkham Files skill checks we all know and love, and run away scared from the Deep Ones and their parents, Mother Hydra and Father Dagon, also pronounced Daddy Dragon. It's an ideal game for a group of friends who fancy pointing fingers at one another for an evening. Let's crack open an ice-cold can of Betrayal. Or Unfathomable. It's not Betrayal. Betrayal's good too, but...
I had a real brain melt when it came to my pick for Game of the Year 2021. It took me about a week to realise that my original pick of Heart: The City Beneath, a fantastic game, came out last year in June, Even to the point where if you watch our pre-recorded podcast, I'm still talking about it being my game of the year. But in my defense, not only did no one else on the team notice, but also, what the hell even was 2021? Like, when did this year start? When did it end? In many ways, this year has just felt like 2020 Part 2, or even 2020 Second Edition. Watch out, incredible segue incoming. So what better pick for my actual game of the year than one of the newly released second editions of one of my all-time favorite games, Summoner Wars. Now, I've spoken about Summoner Wars at length on this channel. For the most part, just very upset that it didn't get the love it deserved as one of the best tactical card games on the market. So imagine how over the moon I was when I learned that the newly independent Plaid Hat Games were making a second edition of the rules with a brand new big box, all new art, and a genuinely very good online edition of the game as well. I promise I'm not just a fanboy. Summoner Wars genuinely lives up to the hype. It's tight, tactical, beautiful, and so easy to play. The factions all interact with each other in a really interesting way. The game's got a great set of plans for post-launch support ahead of it. In general, it is an absolutely fantastic time to be a Summoner Wars fan. So, for all of you out there that haven't given this game a go yet, I'm pleased to say that there is no better time to get involved. It's not like your average card game where you'll fall behind if you don't keep up with releases. Decks are pre-built, factions are all balanced against each other, and you can even try each deck out before you buy them by using the online digital version of Summoner Wars to play against an AI or other players for an absurdly cheap price that's cancelable at any time and runs directly in your browser. This is probably one of the best two-player strategy games ever made, and to see it given a new lease of life in a much tidier and prettier package has left me jumping for joy. Also, fun fact, I thought this came out in 2020, so my perception of time has melted twice in one sitting. Just wait till I find out that it's going to be 2022 in a matter of weeks. Oh God, what?
Hello there, I'm Alex Meehan, staff writer for Dicebreaker, and I'm here to talk about my favourite game of 2020, the thrilling, the challenging, the absolutely bloody enormous Lost Ruins of Arnak. Now, despite being released at the tail end of 2020, this year Lost Ruins of Arnak has swung over crevices, dodged poison traps, cracked ancient puzzles to triumphantly claim the crown of the deck building genre. Now, deck building may have begun with the likes of Dominion and the Legendary series, but it has since grown significantly. The majority of modern deck building games have merged the genre with various other gameplay mechanics, such as Clank's push your luck aspects or Tyrants of the Underdark's area control elements. Now, Dominion's bread and butter approach to the genre was excellent for the time, and it's still a great entry point for beginners, but it feels so rudimentary when compared to something like Lost Ruins of Arnak. At its core, Arnak is a board game about discovery. Not just thematically speaking, as the game is set on a mysterious island filled with ancient temples, treasure and monsters, but mechanically speaking as well. When you first approach the game, its massive size is on par with the kind of magnificent structures pictured on its artwork, but every subsequent playthrough allows players more and more opportunities to get over the initial intimidation and understand its inner workings. In the game, players take on the role of archaeologists who seek to uncover the secrets of the island of Arnak. However, they only have so much time to do it and so many resources to spare. But there are several different ways of scoring victory points in Arnak, from unearthing idols at dig sites to acquiring rare artifacts or even deciphering the mysteries of an ancient civilization. And deciding which to pursue is the game's true challenge. Arnak teaches you that a buffet isn't necessarily about trying to grab as much as you can, it's more about taking the extra time to pick out the best bits. In your first time around in Arnak, it's inevitable that you'll spread yourself too thin trying to do something of everything, but that only ever leads to low point scoring and disappointment. Believe me,
I know. But the next time you face Arnak, you're better prepared to dedicate yourself to fewer paths, giving you the opportunity to gain bigger rewards and score better. After learning this lesson, the next big step in Arnak is understanding efficiency. Players may have small decks in Arnak, as acquiring new cards is expensive and not always the best option, but that doesn't mean they can't do a lot with them. Each turn allows for one main action, such as travelling to a dig site, performing an action on a card, or fighting a guardian, plus any amount of free actions players may have to hand. This means that whilst the first 1 or 2 rounds of Arnak may feel uneventful, once players have resources and other cards to hand, then they have the potential to squeeze every single morsel out of every round thereafter. Setting yourself up for more fruitful turns is the key to playing Arnak well, and the desire to master this is what keeps players coming back for more. There is nothing more satisfying in Arnak than being able to collect a load of points because of the careful actions performed in turns past. Combine this quest for efficiency with the random elements featured in the game, such as what cards are available to buy, which dig site rewards appear and which guardians spawn, and the unexpected actions of your opponents, and you've got one heck of a challenge on your hands. Beyond its size and theme, this is what makes Arnak truly a game about exploration, because it's one you'll be playing over and over again to discover all its hidden pathways. Now, with the release of its first expansion, Expedition Leaders, which adds excellent playable characters, new roles and alternative boards, there are even more secrets added into the game. Lost Ruins of Arnak stands head and shoulders above all other deck building games as a shining example of how far the genre has come and, hopefully, a peek into the future of where it could go next. And that is why it's my game of the year.
I spend a lot of time thinking about board games. Lots of board games. It's the nature of the job. We try and see, play, and understand everything that hits the tabletop. Or about as close as I can get as a single human being with finite time in the day and only so many friends available at weekends. This year though, one game dominated my thoughts. Oath, Chronicles of Empire and Exile. Now, this will likely come as little surprise to those of you who've been reading and watching Dicebreaker for a while. After all, my admiration for designer Cole Worley's games is hardly a secret. The second edition of Pax Pamir was my favourite game of 2019, and the asymmetrical masterpiece that is Root may well be my favourite board game of all time. That said, even I was surprised by just how hard I fell under Oath's enthralling spell of strategy and storytelling. On its face, Oath is a board game of fairly familiar parts. You command armies of wooden pawns, you visit and seize control locations, you trade coins, and you ultimately wrestle for rule of the land. You have a number of action points to spend each turn, trying to optimize your investment in traveling, building up your forces, and choosing carefully when to engage in all-out warfare with your rivals. Dice are rolled for fights, and cards are spent for effects. It's how Oath colours between these solid, dependable lines that makes it so much more than just another strategy game with a gorgeous coat of paint. Although it's got to be said, it looks fantastic thanks to returning Root artist Carl Ferrin. Or maybe it was more accurate to say how the players colour between the lines with the vivid palette that Oath provides. Oath conjures up one of the most evocative narratives of any board game I've ever played. And most importantly, this narrative takes place as much around the table as on it. Over the course of a single session, players' fortunes rise and fall, alliances are forged and broken, and even the victory condition that everyone is striving for can change. One player starts as the Chancellor, the ruling power who will maintain their grip on the throne if the other player's exiles fail to seize it from them by the later rounds of the game. And bear in mind that a random die adds a bit of tension to the one more turn climax, so you don't always know when the game is going to end. Like many historical rulers, their game is one of desperately trying to hold on to power as their empire is gradually whittled away by those allied by a common enemy.
The Exiles, meanwhile, are classical heroes. They start with little and they build up through determination and patience to overthrow their, at first, insurmountable foe. Whether it's through subterfuge, the support of the people, pure military might, or something else, is the clever touch of Oath's shifting victory conditions. The arcs of each session aren't forgotten once the game is packed away either. Oath's Chronicles system tracks the impact of players' decisions and the outcome of each playthrough on the fantasy world, with the exact details left tantalisingly vague. An upstart exile can become the Chancellor only to be overthrown during the next game, their route to power often paving the way for their own downfall. And individual places and people in the world grow, move and disappear, sometimes for in-game generations, as the land is reshaped and the game is rearranged around the who, how and what of sessions past. It's as impressive as the permanent evolution of legacy board games, but with no fixed endpoint. Like history itself, Oath's world just continues regardless, laying the stage for endless new stories. It's for this reason that Oath stands out as not just the best board game I played in 2021, but one of the most singular board games I've ever played. I've rarely, maybe never, experienced a game that understands so clearly why so many people play tabletop games, for the stories written around the table with friends, and manages to make that such a key, concrete part of the experience on the table too. Oath is a game that will continue to occupy my thoughts into 2022, spurred by the exciting news that Whirly is already working on a new Chronicle game, Arcs, Collapse and Conflict in the Void. But for now, Oath is a game that reminded me why I play board games, and it's an experience that I'll continue to think about for a long time to come.